Today we will learn and reflect on the Socratic dialogues by Xenophon in Plato, the Symposium, where the dinner guests offer speeches, many of them on love. In this video, we will reflect on the final speech delivered by Socrates. Our first video reflects on the speeches by the guests on romantic and carnal love, the love for our friends and lovers, the love which we all seek. If our love for a lover or friend is a genuine and true love, then it reflects the divine and noble love so richly painted by Socrates. Just as Socrates finishes his speech on divine and noble love, our drunken and rowdy friend Alcibiades crashes the party and is invited to give his own speech on love, which is really a speech comparing his carnal love for Socrates to Socrates' divine love for Alcibiades and all his students, and indeed for all of Athens. At the end of our talk, we'll discuss the sources used for this video. Please feel free to follow along in our PowerPoint script posted to SlideShare. Please, we welcome interesting questions in the comments. Let us learn and reflect together. In his concluding speech, Socrates tells us of the lessons on love that were taught to him by Diotima of Mantineia, a woman wise in this and many other kinds of knowledge, who in the days of old magically delayed the plague from striking Athens for 10 years. Dr. Wikipedia informs us that Diotima means someone who honors or is honored by Zeus, and that Mantineia suggests that she is a prophet. She is likely a literary device. Scholars credit this speech as the inspiration for Platonic love. This speech is a dialogue within the dialogue, as Socrates asks Diotima about the secrets of love, for Diotima was his Socratic instructress in the art of love. Socrates proclaimed that love was a mighty god and likewise fair, but Diotima proved that love was neither fair nor good. Do not infer that because love is not fair and good, he is therefore foul and evil, for love is a mean between them. Furthermore, love is a great spirit, and like all spirits, he is intermediate between the divine and the mortal. Love mediates between gods and men, conveying to the gods the prayers and sacrifices of men, and to men the commands and replies of the gods. God mingles not with man, but through love all intercourse in conversing with God, whether awake or asleep, is carried on. The knowledge which understands this is spiritual. All other knowledge, such as arts and handicraft, is mean and vulgar. Diotima then tells this tale of the birthing of love. On the birthday of Aphrodite, goddess of desire, there was a feast of the gods, at which Poros of Plenty, who was the son of Metis or Discretion, was one of the guests. When the feast was over, Peneia, or Poverty, came to the door to beg. Now Plenty, who was drunk with nectar, food of the gods, went into the garden of Zeus and fell into a heavy sleep, and Poverty plotted to have a child by him. And accordingly she lay down at his side and conceived love. Love partly because he is naturally a lover of the beautiful, because Aphrodite is herself beautiful, but because he was born on her birthday, is her follower and attendant. As his parentage, so are love's fortunes. In the first place, love is always poor, and anything but tender and fair, as many imagine him. He is rough and squalid, and has no shoes, nor a house to dwell in. Like his mother, he is always in distress. But like his father, love is always plotting against the fair and the bold. He is bold, enterprising, a mighty hunter, always weaving some intrigue or another, keen in the pursuit of wisdom. Love is a philosopher or lover of wisdom. Not all which men call love is truly love. Diotima reasons that people say that lovers seek their other half, but this search is not genuine, unless the half or the whole also be a good. Men can only truly love the good. Love may be described as the love of the everlasting possession of the good. Now, the best example of how you may think you love someone, but this is not truly love, unless your love is genuine, is the advice St. John of the Cross gives us in selecting our close friends. And who could be a closer friend than your spouse? We need to choose our close friends with care, lest they be a spiritual luxury that clouds our soul and hinders our spiritual life. St. John of the Cross teaches us, when our friendship is purely spiritual, the love of God grows with it. And the more the soul remembers it, the more it remembers the love of God, and the greater the desire it has for God. But a sensual friendship decreases in us our love of God and obstructs our spiritual progress. If that sensual love grows, the soul's love of God will grow colder, and will forget God as it remembers the sensual love. By analogy, when we fall in love, when we seek to marry, do we seek someone who will make us happy? But if our marriage is both happy and successful, each spouse must first seek to be kind to each other, putting each other's needs and happiness first, each seeing the marriage as a monastic calling. When we draw an analogy from the writings of St. John of the Cross to our lives as laymen, we should ask this question about our friendships. Do we bring out the best in each other, or do we bring out the worst in each other? And the prospective bride should ask herself the key question: will he be a good father? Will he be good with our children? In our video on St. John of the Cross, we also discussed at length one of my favorite Bible stories, Jezebel and Ahab. Theirs is one of the few happy marriages of the Old Testament. Jezebel wants her darling husband to be happy, and when she discovers he is sulking because Naboth won't sell him his vineyard, what does she do? She frames Naboth for blasphemy, so he is executed, and then she gives the vineyard to Ahab. As you can see in the painting, in the end of the story, the wild dogs devour her body in the streets, likely while she was still alive, so we know that Jezebel did not meet a very pleasant end. My comments here are colored by the advice offered in the Divorce Support Group DVDs and the Non-Denominational Divorce Care Program, which has both Protestant and Catholic parishes hosting these support groups. And I would also like to mention that there's a Catholic-specific program, which is beneficial since it covers the Catholic Church's teachings on annulments. Now, Diotima does acknowledge that common love does have its divine aspects, especially how men and beasts both seek partners and protect their young. Do you not see how all animals are in agony when they are infected by love, how eager they are to mate, and how often they are tormented with hunger or suffer anything to maintain their young? This is also true for men. Marvel not then at the love which all men have of their offspring, for that universal love and interest is for the sake of immortality. The Greeks in the time of Socrates lived in a warrior culture, and Diotima also marvels at how warriors are often stirred by the love of immortality of fame, ready to run all risks far greater than they would for the sake of their children, and to spend money and endure toil, and even die, for the sake of leaving behind them a name which should be eternal. And she gives us the example of how Achilles revenged the death of his friend Patroclus in the Iliad. Diotima observes that there are more noble souls who seek a more lasting legacy, which may or may not lead to fame. Those who seek to improve the world through wisdom and virtue, some through art and poetry, and some who possess the greatest and fairest sort of wisdom, who seek a better ordering of states and families through temperance and justice. These are noble souls who seek out other souls who can become noble through moral education on philosophy, who educate their children on the noble lessons of Homer, the poet Solon, and the philosophers. The philosophic wisdom is what is most beautiful. The beauty of the mind is more honorable than the beauty of the outward form. Now, when Plato speaks about the forms, he reveals that there's an ideal form that is the perfect form, which later Christian Neoplatonists say resides in the mind of God. The virtuous soul contemplates the beauty of laws and institutions created in the boundless love of wisdom. Plato explores the founding of a utopian government, and his works on the laws was his final dialogue. In her conclusion, Diotima declares to Socrates how the true love of wisdom soars to the heights of heaven, heights to which the later Neoplatonists will ascend, where language and perception can no longer describe or perceive. We reflected on the commentary on the Beatitudes by St. Gregory of Nyssa, whose works were an inspiration for Dionysius the Areopagite, where pilgrims first climb out of Plato's cave of ignorance into the light, and then climbs the mountain of heaven, which C.S. Lewis's characters also climb in his work on the Great Divorce. Diotima declares that those who seek love and seek to love beauty will perceive a nature of wondrous beauty which is everlasting, not growing or decaying, or waxing or waning. This nature is neither fair nor foul, outside of speech and knowledge, outside of existence, but is beauty absolute, separate, simple, and everlasting, never diminishing nor increasing, and is unchanging, neither growing nor perishing, ascending under the influence of true love. Diotima's soaring description of love in similar writings by Plato further inspired the Neoplatonists, such as Plotinus and Proclus, and who inspired Christian Neoplatonists such as Dionysius the Areopagite. And let us compare this poetry of thought of Diotima on divine love to the opening stanzas of the key work by Dionysius the Areopagite on mystical theology. Trinity, higher than any being, any divinity, any goodness, guide of Christians in the wisdom of heaven. Lead us beyond unknowing and light, up to the farthest highest peak of mystic scripture, where the mysteries of God's Word is simple, absolute, and unchangeable, and the brilliant darkness of a hidden silence. Amid the deepest shadow, they pour overwhelming light on what is most manifest. Amid the wholly unsensed and unseen, they completely fill our sightless minds with treasures beyond all beauty. Diotima asks the question that all true philosophers ask, the questions that can never be answered, for the answer can only be eternally sought after. What if man had eyes to see the true beauty, the divine beauty, pure and clear and unalloyed, not clogged with the pollutions of mortality and all the colors and vanities of human life, conversing with true beauty, simple and divine? As Socrates finishes his recollections of what Diotima taught him about divine love, then immediately we hear a great knocking at the door and the sound of a flute girl and many revelers, and everyone wonders, who are these intruders? Why, it is Alcibiades. He boisterously proclaims, "Hail, friends!" He is crowned with a massive garland of ivy and violets, his head flowing with ribands. Will you have a very drunken man as a companion to your revels? Or shall I crown Agathon, which was my intention in coming, and go away? Now this dialogue was set in a time when both Socrates and Alcibiades were younger, before Alcibiades talked the Athenian assembly into breaking the peace of Nicias and sending a massive expedition to Sicily, before he was unjustly prosecuted for impiety while he was on campaign. That Sicilian fleet was destroyed, and not wanting to face trumped-up charges and certain conviction, Alcibiades turned traitor and advised the Spartans on how to win the war. Then Alcibiades sleeps with the Queen of Sparta. He leaves Sparta under a death sentence, and then advises the Persians on how to succeed in prosecuting the war. Then he bursts onto the scene with the Athenian fleet based in Samos, manages to be appointed general, and once again provides excellent leadership, with a 5-year-long string of victories for Athens, until he is voted out of office and leaves for exile, and Athens loses the war against Sparta and her allies. So Alcibiades bursts into the dinner party just as boisterously as he burst onto the scene of the Athenian fleet in Samos, demonstrating what Aristophanes said about him in one of his plays. The Athenians love him, they hate him, and they can't do without him. Plutarch tells us of the essence of his character. As for Alcibiades' good looks, they bloomed in his childhood and his youth, and when he had grown up too, however old he was. His attractiveness and charm and good looks never left him. He was highly passionate, and his most powerful motivation was the desire to compete and to come first. Plutarch reveals the vices of Alcibiades, but along with his statesmanship, eloquence, pride, and ingenuity went, by contrast, a luxurious lifestyle of overindulgence in drink and sex, effeminacy of dress, and incredible extravagance. Many notable men of Athens combined feelings of abhorrence and disgust with the fear of his haughty and lawless attitude, which could be tyrannical in its excessiveness. In the Symposium, the guests eagerly invite Alcibiades to join him, because he's always one to liven up the party. And they ask Alcibiades to give the last speech on love, and he agrees. But he instead speaks of the divine love Socrates has for his soul, versus his base physical desires and carnal love, never consummated, for Socrates, despite many temptations and many wooings, and how the divine love of Socrates is the superior love. Alcibiades confesses that Socrates would transfix me, so I would seek to grow old sitting at his feet. For he makes me confess that I ought not to live as I do, neglecting the wants of my own soul, and busying myself with the concerns of the Athenians. Socrates is the only person who ever made me feel ashamed. I know I should do as he suggests, but when I leave his presence, the love of popularity gets the better of me. Therefore I run away and fly from him, and when I see him, I am ashamed of what I have confessed to him. Many times I wish that he were dead, yet I know that I should be much more sorry than glad if he were to die, so that I am at wit's end. So in this last comment about Socrates, is Alcibiades unwittingly admitting that his arrogance makes true empathy for another person impossible? Alcibiades truly commends Socrates. Know that beauty and wealth and honor are of no account to Socrates and are utterly despised by him. He is not impressed by those who are handsome, wealthy, or popular. All his life is spent in mocking them, flouting their superiority. But Alcibiades saw in Socrates divine and golden images of fascinating beauty, that I was ready to do in a moment whatever Socrates commanded. Alcibiades and Socrates were close friends. They both fought as hoplites in the Battle of Mantineia, where Socrates saved Alcibiades. Alcibiades describes how he tried numerous times to seduce Socrates, but he was repeatedly rebuffed. He even invited Socrates to supper one night drinking wine, though Socrates, no matter how much he drinks, never gets drunk, and Socrates never relaxes his self-control and self-discipline. One such night, after much wine was drunk, they discussed moral philosophy, and since it was late, Socrates fell asleep on the couch. And since he had enormous respect for him, Alcibiades merely covered Socrates and let him sleep. All his life, Alcibiades was looking for city-states and lovers to conquer, but he met in Socrates someone he could never conquer, who was above conquering. Alcibiades rhetorically asked the other guests, "What do you suppose must have been my feelings after this rejection at the thought of my own dishonor?" Which is an odd question. Alcibiades never considered whether anyone else had feelings. Alcibiades continues, "Yet I could not help wondering at his natural temperance and self-restraint and manliness. I never imagined that I could have met with a man such as he in wisdom and endurance. Therefore, I could not be angry with him or renounce his company, any more than I could hope to win him." Plutarch comments, the fact that Socrates was in love with Alcibiades strongly suggests that the boy was endowed with a natural aptitude for virtue. Socrates saw Alcibiades' good looks as the brilliant external manifestation of this excellence. And Plutarch states that Socrates pursued Alcibiades more as an irate schoolmaster than as a lover. Socrates, with his love, did tend to subdue Alcibiades, who had sufficient innate excellence for Socrates' arguments to get through to him, wrench his heart, and start the tears flowing. But he also sometimes surrendered to his flatterers and all the delights they held out, and he would give Socrates the slip and be hunted down, for all the world like a runaway slave, because Socrates was the only one of his lovers that he respected and feared, while he had nothing but contempt for the rest. Although Plato in passages we did not quote does approve of homosexual relationships when they are respectful towards the younger party, where the older man seeks to be his mentor and moral example, his description of the relationship between Socrates and Alcibiades clearly dials back the sensual side of close male friendships. Now that we've reflected on the final speech in Plato's Symposium, we will examine Socrates' final speech on love in the other symposium described by Xenophon. No doubt Xenophon had read Plato's classic Symposium, and likely he was seeking to neither better nor refute Plato's account, but rather Xenophon reinforces the platonic Socratic notion of love, perhaps seeking to restate it in simpler terms. In Xenophon's Symposium, Socrates states, "Gentlemen, we are in the presence of a great deity, as old in time as the eternal gods, and yet more youthful in appearance, who pervades all things in his greatness and is enshrined in the heart of men. I mean love. Most of us have been touched by love," Socrates states. "I can't name a time when I haven't been continuously in love with someone." Reflecting on the speech on love by Pausanias, Xenophon Socrates reasons, "Whether there is one Aphrodite or two, celestial or common, I don't know. Zeus has many titles, though he is regarded as the same deity." Socrates continues, "But I do know there are altars and shrines for both, with casual rites for the common Aphrodite and more devout rites for the celestial Aphrodite. The common Aphrodite inspires physical love, and the celestial Aphrodite inspires love of mind, friendship, and noble deeds." Socrates urges, "Love for the mind is much better than physical love. Those who have a celestial love for the character of their beloved have a pleasant love, but many with sensual desires criticize and dislike the characters of those whom they love. For those with a sensual love, the bloom of youth quickly fades, as does affection. But when a mind is progressing to a greater wisdom, the more lovable it becomes." Now we'll discuss the Christian definition of love, and we have to remember that one reason why Christian scribes were so careful to preserve nearly all the works of Plato and Xenophon is that their philosophy was both compatible with Christianity and also influences and enriches Christian theology. So the core teaching of both the Jewish and Christian traditions will also enrich what we learn about love in the Symposium. And what is this core teaching? Jesus exhorts us, "You shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your mind, and with all of your strength. This is the greatest and first commandment," and Jesus is quoting from Deuteronomy. "And the second is like it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself," plus the St. Maximus corollary, "Be eager to forgive your neighbor." Both of these commandments are the divine love that Plato describes in the Symposium. Like the country song suggests, if you don't love your neighbor, you don't love God. As we learn from St. John of the Cross, If our love for our neighbor or our love for our spouse does not increase in us our love of God, then it is not love at all. Which means that you cannot speak about two types of love, one mortal, one divine, as do the speakers like Agathon in the Symposium. Although you could talk about love and lust. Love being unselfish and lust being selfish. And when you lust, you only care about yourself, and you do not care about the well-being of your partner or friend. And St. Augustine, in his core work on Christian teaching, answers the question, how should we read Scripture? St. Augustine teaches us, whoever thinks he understands the Holy Scriptures or any parts of them, but interprets them in a way that does not build up his twofold love of God and love of neighbor, does not truly understand the Scriptures. If, on the other hand, a man draws a meaning from Scriptures that builds up the twofold love of God and love of his neighbor, although he does not precisely understand the exact meaning of the author, his error is not pernicious, and he is wholly clear from the charge of deception. Now we'll discuss the sources we used in this video. The speech by Diotima strongly reminded me of a passage on genuine friendship in St. John of the Cross's book, Dark Night of the Soul, and also the writings of St. Dionysius the Areopagite, and also St. Augustine's On Christian Teaching, also known as On Christian Doctrine. St. Augustine is my favorite saint because he ties in the twofold love of God and neighbor in all his major works. Since many of our videos on ancient Greece use many of the same sources, we have a video on book reviews of ancient Greek history and philosophy. The YouTube description includes a link to our PowerPoint script that we uploaded to SlideShare and also our blog. Please support this channel by sharing this video with your friends and by clicking on the like and subscribe buttons and by clicking on the Amazon links to purchase any of the books we discussed, which will earn us a very small affiliate commission. And please consider becoming a patron of our channel. Plus, we will host special discussion groups for our patrons. Plus, you can click on the Meetup or small M icon to participate in our online discussions, where we practice our future YouTube scripts. And please click on the links for other videos that will broaden your knowledge and improve your soul.